Good morning. Good morning. Yum. Where's that from? Red Robin. I love that place. They closed down in Paramus, though.
He did?
Yeah, they closed it down. So you have to go to Secaucus now for unlimited fries. Bottomless fries, they call it. But to be honest, you can't even really eat more than like 2 baskets because it gets so doughy at the end.
Doughy?
Because they got the big, the steak frites, you know?
They're potatoes. They have nothing to do. It has nothing to do with dough.
No, the texture is doughy. I love Red Robin, so if anyone wants to take me to Red Robin, I'll probably go. Today is July the 22nd of the year 2024, and it is a hot summer, but it's slowly cooling down, so hopefully you are staying cool in this hot weather, as we are as well during summer school, because we have great AC here. Summer school is still going on, week 3 starting today, and so if you could please continue to pray for us. I think we've really been carried by our prayers, and so please continue to pray for us. That it be a safe and good, fun school that glorifies the Lord.
Week 3.
Week 3.
Yep.
Halfway there.
No.
No, because it's the beginning of week 3.
You're a third of the way.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. After this week, we're halfway there. Then it's just one more week, and then it's 4 weeks, and you're like, yo, what the heck? There's 2 more weeks left. And then it's week 5, and then it's week 6, and it's done. I kind of miss it already. Yeah. Anywho, when you are listening to this, we are probably in summer school. School is in session, so please pray for us. Today, we are continuing our summer Hags Have a Great Summer series on the book of Ecclesiastes, trying to get wise. And so I have no follow-up to that. Trying to get wise. This summer is a wise summer because on Wednesdays we have Words of Wisdom on Wednesday, and then on Mondays we have Ecclesiastes. And then on Saturdays, more often than not, we have Proverbs. But this morning we are talking about the 2nd chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes and some current events. Talking about God's sovereignty and about hosting, how we can be better hosts as per our message this past Wednesday. And so let's get it going. You're listening to the Dear Church Podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church Podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang, and we have with us Pastor Eugene. So I have decided to not shave for Mondays because I need as much contrast in my face as possible, because I think this lighting makes my face look a certain way. I just want as much that's why I wear glasses, because people have been saying, why do you have half eyebrows? So I just need a lot of contrast. I'm trying to grow out my facial hair. But that's neither anyone's business.
Sure.
Should we get started?
Might as well.
So this is the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 2. In the ESV, I will read it for us. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also, my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward from all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there was more gain in wisdom than in folly, and there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise, as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life because what is done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and a striving after wind. I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool? Yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun. Because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What is a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. Amen. So this is Ecclesiastes chapter 2. The preacher is continuing on after what we heard and read last week in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. All is vanity. And I was hoping that we could again go like a verse by verse study on this. And I know that last week, we said that chapter 1 is kind of laying the foundation of what we will be reading for the next however many weeks. And we said that it is understanding who the person is and his place in the world, that we are just but a mist. And he continues here, and it seems like he's almost saying nothing is really worth it. He did all these great things. Nothing is worth it. Where is the wisdom that we can find in this chapter?
It's a long chapter. There are 3 parts to it. And if you have the ESV Bible, it does give you nice little headings to help you see where the 3 parts are. But the first part, he is reflecting on pleasure.
Yep.
The second part, he is going to reflect on wisdom, madness, and folly, or wisdom and folly. And the third part, he's going to reflect on toil. And he's going to reflect on it because he would have experienced it.
Right.
And so he's going to tell you that all these things are vanity, whether it's pleasure, wisdom and folly, or toil.
So I'm a little confused because in the beginning of the chapter, it almost makes it seem like enjoyment is folly. It's vanity. But then at the end, he says that that's all that man has to enjoy the things that he has been given. And so I don't really understand what the overarching, theme throughout this chapter is.
And he gives us one of his conclusive remarks. I think there are 7. And he gives one of them here at the end of chapter 2, which is from verse 24, verse 24, 25. But that's one of his conclusive remarks about just what man goes through and the pleasures that man has, or the reward for his toil, all that stuff. But it doesn't take away from what he was initially saying about the vanity of all these things, whether it's pleasure, wisdom and folly, or toil.
So when he says that it's vanity, is he is he warning us not to do these things, or is he telling us of the, I guess, eternal value of these things? Because he talks about all of his accomplishments, right? He builds houses, plants vineyards, gardens, parks, everything. He has slaves, which I do want to talk about, and he has concubines, which I do want to talk about. So he has everything that he could ever want, anything that his heart desires, he has, and
Yeah,
yet he says
I think
it's vanity.
that's exactly what it is. Vanity means, well, vanity means it's just a breath. It's just a mist. Here 1 second, gone the next. Is there anything that is not a mist? That's what he's trying to get at.
Okay.
So, of eternal value, that's a great contrast to put it to. But he's saying, is there anything that even lasts more than a breath?
Right. Right.
And he says, no, everything is vain. Everything is vanity. Everything is meaningless. Everything is a mere mist. Here one moment and gone the next. And so that's what he's actually going through. One of the major, like these major subjects, from pleasure to wisdom to toil, because these are the things that man would go through.
Because I think when people read this, when people hear the word vain or vanity, we know as Christians to avoid those things. And so I thought when people might read this, they might think, okay, then am I supposed to avoid this? But this is literally like the entirety of life. So how do we avoid this? But what you're saying is the way that he's describing this is he's talking about just the value and the nature of all these things, these worldly accomplishments. It's just but a mist.
It's because this is what we want. We want something that lasts more than a second. You know what else is vain? What else is a breath? Idols. Idols are a breath. Idols are a mist. Idols are nothing, right?
Yeah, yeah.
They are here 1 second, gone the next.
Yeah.
They are a fart in the wind.
Oh, a fart?
Gone. Yep.
Some farts linger.
In the wind? Like, how heavy is this fart? Heavier than the wind?
No.
The point is, that's what it is. Nothing is going to last.
Yeah.
And, but we act like it does. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We all live as if these things last. So why do you seek pleasure? Because you do believe it will last. Why do you seek wisdom? Because you believe that it will last. Why do you seek to find a reward for your toil? Why do you toil? Because you believe that what you get out of the toil, it will last. And what he is saying is none of these things will last. None of these things will even produce for you something that lasts. So that's what he's getting at. It's a fascinating way of putting it, of course, but the way he starts off, he's saying, I'm going to keep my wisdom with me and I'm going to seek pleasure, meaning he's not going to act a fool.
Right.
And he's going to seek these things with the wisdom that he has. He's going to have all the pleasures that the world can offer and in like the best way possible. Mm-hmm. Isn't that what people want though? Isn't that why people want to acquire power, fame, money, and all these things? They want this pleasure and they want to keep that pleasure. They want to make sure that it lasts. But he's saying, even with the wisdom that I, held, these things are vanity. It's a mist.
So I guess the question that I think some people may be wondering, and, he kind of talks about generational wealth here, right? Because he's saying, like, what's the point of gaining all these things if you don't know how your son or daughter will take care of it in the next generation? But generational wealth, leaving things for your kids and the generations that follow after them, and acquiring, having all these accomplishments. I understand that it's vanity in the sense that it's fleeting, but then how do you correctly pursue vain things? Because we need to build houses, right? We need to have accomplishments, or else we're just living mediocre lives, not having any goals or anything. And we need to take care of our families, and hopefully if we have enough money, we could take care of the generations that follow us. But Solomon here says that it's vain, it's a mist. And so understanding it's a mist, how do we as Christians then correctly go about seeking to attain these things, knowing that they're vain?
Well, to be fair to the teacher, the Koholeth, we're not supposed to get there yet. He wants to put us where he was, like
Gotcha.
Put us in his seat, or put on his shoes.
Right.
So he is in this despair. So as much wisdom as he has, as much power as he has, as much as he has accomplished and acquired, he recognizes the vanity of it all. And when we strive for things, when we want, let's say, a nice house or a nice car or a good family, all these things, it's okay, I suppose, but that's not what he's trying to get at. Whether it's good, bad, medium, adiaphora, whatever it is, that's not what he's trying to get at. He's trying to get at the value of it all. The value of it all is vanity, meaning if you want to assess something, you need to know its value. Otherwise, you cannot go, you can't deal with anything around it and its context properly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if I know that there's a $100 bill on the floor, I know that this is of value because I just said it's $100. So I know the value, so I will deal with what's in front of me accordingly, right? It's not just a crumpled up piece of paper. It's not garbage. It's not poison, right? It's a $100 bill. And so if you can assess the value of something, an object or some kind of, thing in life, whatever it is, then you can properly deal with it. But if you can't assess it properly, meaning if you treat a $100 bill like you would treat $1 million, your life will not work out well for you.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you treat $100 like it's worth $1, your life will also not work out properly for you.
Yeah.
So if you want to deal with the things in life in a proper manner, you should assess the value of things properly. So that's what he's doing. He is assessing the value of all these things that the world is trying to get at. And, that's exactly what we do in life. In life, we're always assessing the value of things. And that according to the value system that we set up, we go after it or we don't go after it. Our life revolves around what we understand to be a true value of certain things, right? So if I really love Brian and I think he is of incredible value, I treat him in such a way. If I didn't think so, I would also treat him in such a way. And so he would pick up on that and he would say, Puge thinks of my value like here. And is this right or wrong? And those are things that we always have to deal with, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's like, those roadway shows where they take these antiques and then they give it to someone to assess. It used to be really popular back in the day, right? And then they were like, this was like my grandpa's watch and I had it.
Oh, yeah.
They're like, this is actually a World War II antique and now it's worth like $10,000. The guy's like, really?
Yeah.
And so we have people that would give a proper assessment. And this is the teacher coming to us, giving us the proper assessment of the things that we would probably think most about, which is pleasure, which is wisdom and folly, and which is toil.
So we're still building up then, because I know last week we were building up and the teacher was giving, I guess, like the accurate positioning of where humankind is and the whole scope of things. Now he's giving us the accurate value of quote unquote quality living.
Yeah, but it's not without the conclusion.
Right.
Which he kind of gives us a little, so he doesn't just leave us
taste
nowhere. Yeah, he does give us a little taste.
So before we get to the little taste, I wanted to ask a couple questions that I thought people may have in the earlier verses. So here, and I think this is the tricky thing, and there's a bigger question that I want to ask is when we read of the Israelite kings and when we read of men who were supposed to be of God, faithful to God, right? Kings like Solomon and David. They always do things that we are kind of like, okay, I don't know about that one. So for example, in verse 7, Solomon, we assume, if I find out when we go to heaven it wasn't Solomon, I'll be very sad about that one because I would have lied. But I'm assuming it's Solomon.
I mean,
like 99% chance, right?
I'm not surprised.
Like it would be Solomon.
No, I'm not surprised if we find out that you're wrong about something. This is like, are you surprised in heaven? Of the things that you could be surprised about in heaven, you're like, my goodness, I was wrong.
No, like about this though, like about Hebrews and Paul, could be wrong. Like I don't know.
Okay.
I think Chuzak believes that it's Paul though. Yeah, but I don't know. I'm not saying anything. I don't want to be wrong. In verse 7, we talk about slaves. So Solomon had slaves. Verse 8, we know for a fact Solomon had concubines. And so the question is, when we read of the patriarchs and when we read of kings who were faithful to God, do these different things, are we supposed to take it as God saying that these things are okay? Or are these just errors that we are supposed to just kind of discern and be like, okay, this is where he messed up. We're not supposed to follow this example.
We know for a fact that God doesn't approve of certain things when we see it and read it in his law. A lot of times when we look at, let's say, 1st and 2nd Samuel or, Kings, it's just narrative. They're just telling us what's happening.
Yeah.
When we read Genesis, they're just telling us what's happening. So what was the big deal with Isaac in Genesis?
What was the big deal with him?
Yeah. Like, we don't know a lot about Isaac. We just know maybe 2 major things. And one is he was almost killed in Moriah.
Yep.
Because his dad was about to sacrifice him.
And when he's old, right?
And then the second one is when he's old.
Yep.
Those are the only 2 things we know about him.
Yep.
Maybe like a little in between with Rebecca. Mm-hmm. And he's like, oh, I'm okay now that
he moved the stone. He's mad strong.
No, that's Jacob.
Oh, yeah.
But he is...
What am I saying?
He's the one that was comforted after Sarah's death, right?
Yeah.
And so we know little bits about him, but the 2 major things about Isaac that we know is from Moriah. And then when he's old, what do we know about him when he's old is he loved to eat the game that Esau would kill and bring forth, right?
Yeah.
And we know later on as we continue to read that this is not a good thing. This is what you would kind of assess, but you wouldn't actually see it necessarily in the narrative. And so these are things, obviously, that God would allow for, and also he would use for his purpose. Because of that, all these things happen, and God would use it to bless Jacob. And, now we know the story of Israel. But in the same way, is God someone that really enjoys it, that if we have concubines? Obviously not, because in the beginning he created Adam and 300 wives. That's not what it says.
Yeah.
In the beginning God created Adam and then he created his wife, right?
So what my fear is, well, not my fear, because I'm not scared of anything, but I think what people may fear is that if someone were to ask, what's so wrong about having them today, people might say, well, it was a cultural thing back in the day, right? We don't see concubines ever today, not in our context, not in our culture. Besides, we
believe it's archaic and
right.
It's something. It's a relic of the past,
right? What if someone were to say, well, that's the same with sexual immorality. That's the same with homosexuality. It was forbidden back then, but it's a cultural thing. Because then the moment we just stick on cultural to anything, that's when it gets a little iffy, because people can say, well, that's cultural, this is cultural, Paul was being cultural, this, So how do we differentiate between the two?
Well, I mean, you look at the past and you look at every time, let's say someone had more than one wife, there's always problems attached to it.
Yeah.
It was never smooth sailing for anybody. If you're a man, just understand one woman is more than enough troubles. We were meant for one woman, and to be completely given to her and her given to the man, that kind of thing. That's how God designed it. When we stray from that, we always see that there's trouble. Obviously, Solomon had trouble because his many wives turned him away from God in the end. So as much wisdom as you have, as great as it was, God's law, if you don't keep it, that brings troubles. Now, the fact that he had concubines, though, doesn't trouble me as much as maybe someone who's really stuck on this part. Like, you could think about slaves, you could think about concubines, whatever it is, was that wise or not wise? It doesn't trouble me that much because I do believe to a certain extent that he honestly believed that he was able to handle that because he had that much wisdom. With that much wisdom, your house can be enlarged. You can take care of a bigger house. So you would naturally think that you could take care of concubines and things of that nature. Notice he doesn't say wives, though. He just says concubines. So that's one thing. I don't think he would get into the wives.
So that's weird, though. No, that's not weird. But how come there's always a differentiation between wives and concubines? Aren't they all just like wives? But there's always a differentiation.
No, wives would be queens, and they would have a much greater status than concubines. And so it's not just in the ancient world. I believe even now, if you look at the British royalty, King Charles, and then now his queen, when Charles divorced Diana, and then he got with this other woman, there was a whole thing about that. Like, this cannot happen, and there's all this protocol that the royal family had to go, and they would not call her queen for the longest time, right?
Yeah.
Because this just wasn't supposed to. So there's all this protocol. So even in modern day, there's protocol for royalty, and it's different from a regular, like, common person. Even today is my point. So back then, kings were held at a different standard too. And that, to me, is fine, because that's just what it was. You're not a king, but a king is maybe the greatness of the nation and the man and all that stuff. And so they would probably see, then I would need a harem and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's what the king would want to do. And now we don't do that stuff because we're not of the world. We don't mimic the world in any way. And we all know that if you go back to the Old Testament times, God wasn't pleased when they wanted a king. Samuel said it.
Right.
It's like, this is what's going to happen. But God was pleased in the sense that they wanted a king again. This is in Kings, because from this line, a true king would come.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be complex in that sense, but the true king has come. It's Jesus Christ. And now we mimic him. Jesus Christ has one bride. That is the church. So we now only have one bride as a man. That is our wife. And it points to Christ in the church. We don't have concubines. We don't have many wives and things like that. We just have one.
Right.
And so that's why if you don't have that, you can't even be a leader in the church, because this is what has been revealed to us in the new covenant. And these are the things that we want to keep going forward. Okay?
Yeah.
And so I wouldn't be troubled by what happened in the past, saying, why can't we have concubines and many wives now? Because
that wasn't the question.
No, I'm just saying, if people were to wonder, because that's not even the point of that first section. The point of that first section is, with his wisdom, he acquired everything that the world would see as pleasurable, and he did it in the most wise way. And I would say, yeah, I absolutely agree. I think he did it in the most wise way, and he acquired everything that was pleasurable. And then he said, this was vanity. It's a striving after the wind. It's like trying to grab wind. That's what it is.
So what I find to be interesting about this chapter is the author, the preacher, he literally has everything and anything a person could ask for. Literally everything. He even says, I think in one of the verses, that whatever his eyes saw, like he just had it. There was nothing holding him back. And this is kind of, I guess, the ideal dream that people may have, where you have everything, anything that you want. You have enough money for generations to come. And yet, even though he has, this is like the pinnacle of mankind in that sense. And yet he says that everything is vanity. Everything is just but a mist.
No, I really like verse 10. Everything that my eyes saw that was good,
yeah,
I didn't keep myself from them.
Yeah.
Meaning, with the wisdom that he had, if he saw that this was good, then he was able to acquire it in the best way possible. And even then, it's nothing.
Yeah.
Even then, it's nothing. So what could we equate that to? I said, what do you really want? Someone might go, I want $10 million, which honestly is a pretty crappy goal. But let's say that's your goal. You want $10 million. And you do it in the most wise way possible.
Yeah.
And you acquire the 10 million. Solomon was able to do that, and he goes, this was vanity. It's just nothing. So those things that we are striving for, he in his wisdom, when he desired it, he was able to get it in the most wise way possible. That's the point. And he still came back saying, this is nothing.
So then do you think that those people who are like the richest in the world, right? You have your top 10 richest people in the world. They're always trying to make more money.
I just don't think they have the wisdom Solomon had.
Right, that's my question.
And they have wisdom, though. They definitely have wisdom. You can't have that kind of money without some kind of wisdom or some level of wisdom or, some kind of intent. It could be godly wisdom or it could be, evil, satanic, demonic wisdom.
Yeah.
Like we saw in James chapter 3. But it is a wisdom, meaning you can put out what you desire. You can, output the skill that you desire.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that we see in the world. But this is what the teacher is telling us. He is saying, and I think the climax really is in the conclusion, but we have a pre-climax in the second portion where he says in verse 16, the wise dies just like the fool.
Yeah.
There is a great equalizer. And the great equalizer of everything that makes everything into vanity is death. So no matter how much you toil, no matter how wise or foolish you are, no matter how much pleasure you can get from this world, there is a great equalizer. And that great equalizer is death.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're one of the richest people in the world, they're going to die just like the poorest person in the world.
Yeah.
They're going to die. And I think this is where we really saw, this would be really reminiscent of, in my opinion, Lamech's wisdom. Lamech had wisdom, and he recognized the vanity, the vainness of it all. And so when Noah was born, he called him Noah, which means relief or rest.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, what he was seeking from all this toil, all this vanity, was rest. And this is where we see the conclusive remark in verse 24. This is the hand of God. When we see any kind of enjoyment or rest in any of the things that we do, this is from God.
I see.
And that's one of the conclusions that we see in Ecclesiastes. And I think that's great. It's a wonderful way to end chapter 2 to show that God is the one that actually makes things worth anything. So if you're going to get rest, if you're going to get relief, if you're going to find it real, true enjoyment, it is from the hand of God.
So last question for this chapter, and I think your review of this chapter was really helpful. And I think, again, like seeing that this man went to the pinnacle of humankind and him looking at everything that he's done, saying it was all just but a mist, I think that should give us some pause. But I thought verse 26 could be confusing. Verse 26 reads, "For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind." People might say that's not true. Wicked people are winning all the time. What does it mean? Because this almost makes it seem like, okay, all these sinners who are rich are going to give everything that they've gathered and collected to believers. But that's not true. So how do we understand this?
I think it's true. I think there's an absolute truth to it. I've been thinking about Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan is a millionaire.
Yeah.
He is a superstar.
Yeah.
The whole world knows who Jackie Chan is. But I think he has multiple children, but there are two that most people know about, a son and a daughter. And he's estranged from his daughter. And his son is definitely a squanderer of anything that he has been given. And so it's people like Jackie Chan, and there's multiple, many, many millionaires and famous people who say, my kids are going to get nothing. My kids are going to get nothing.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if they gave it to them, they realize they will not hold it past their generation. What is their desire? I think these people, their desire is to really raise their children so that they can keep wealth. They need the wisdom
Right.
to keep wealth. and they don't have it. So that's what I think about, because it seems like that wisdom isn't passed on. It's not something that you could pass on. It really is a gift from God. It's a gift from God for you to have wisdom to keep even wealth.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh, there's generational wealth." It's like, is there really? Because what I see is it doesn't last from generation to generation to generation. It really comes down to you will die. And, people are always talking about like the Rothschild and the Bushes and people who have quote unquote generational
Vanderbilt.
wealth. It's very, very very minuscule. Meaning, even if you talked about it statistically, it would be like 99.999% of the world. It doesn't work that way. And I don't know the situation between the Rothschilds and, let's say, the Bushes or whatever it is that people have conspiracy theories for. I don't know their situation. I don't know what they truly hold. I only know that God knows. But what I do know for a fact is what we do know, what we see right in front of us is people cannot hold wealth beyond a few generations, if that. They hold it for one, and they know that the next generation just squanders and gives it away. And the teacher is telling us here that who do they give it away to? They give it away to whom God ordains it to be.
I see.
And so it gives it to the people that, who God wants it to go to. But I think that's the point. The point is, God is in control, meaning God is the one who gives wisdom. And if you don't understand that, it really is, you really are striving after the wind. You really are going after nothing, because what are you really going to keep beyond what you have right now? Nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even what you have now is fleeting. And so it really is a humbling, a sobering reminder of the vanity of all these things that we think to possess more value than it really does have.
Yeah. Thank you for that reminder. I think that's very helpful. Yeah, and I think, and I hope that this mini series is helpful as we go through Ecclesiastes together. It has been helpful for me, and so I hope and pray that it has been helpful for you as well. Pastor Eugene, this is related because we're going back to Proverbs now in our Q&A.
It's Q&A time?
Yes.
We have a little jingle?
We need a beat.
What you got in the bag? What you got in the bag?
What you got in the bag?
So going back to our Q&A, this past Wednesday, we talked about honoring those who are around us. And, I think you used the example of hospitality and hosting. And I think a question came up where, as Christians, we want to be hospitable. And we want to know, what does that practically look like? Is there a correct way to host? Is there a right way to host? Is it, and you use the example of, a host having very little food prepared for the company versus a host having a lot of food prepared. You didn't use this example, but
I did not.
It made me think of this. So you created this monster of a thought. And, if we go over somebody's house, we might be thinking like, oh my goodness, that's so little food for the 30 people that are here, versus, wow, you provide a lot of food, or you don't have this, you have this, you don't have this. What is the correct way to host? And is there like a standard?
I don't know. I don't know. I'm sure there's some kind of cultural standard that you most likely adhere to. I think one of the things that I talked about was, do you bring a gift when you go to someone's house? So if someone invites you over to their house, do you bring a gift?
Yeah.
And we talked about the difference between, let's say, American culture and Korean culture.
Right. Korean
culture, you always bring a gift. No matter what, you bring something. You can't ever go empty-handed, which I think is just not specifically Korean. I think it's generally broad culturally.
Yeah.
And American culture, there is at least that housewarming gift that you have to buy, right? So if someone just bought a house and they invite you for a housewarming, then you bring, like toilet paper or paper towels or a fern or something like that, right?
A fern.
Yeah, some kind of house plant.
Yeah.
Fern usually is a plant that lasts long. So
Is
if you
that
bring
why?
if you bring some other plant, it could die really quickly.
Oh, I see.
And so, yeah,
Okay.
I mean, you don't bring a bouquet of flowers, and
Yeah.
that's more congratulatory.
Right.
And so
right.
you would bring like a house plant. So there is, I think it is just generally speaking across cultures that you bring something when you go to a house. When you host, though, you would also think that there is some kind of cultural, response or way that you would host to be a good host. How do you host well? And so you have to know your guests.
Right.
What do these guests like? And is it honoring to them and is it honoring to God? I think those are the two things you always have to keep in mind. You can't just simply say, I'm going to honor them and do whatever they want. That definitely isn't the only standard, but
Right.
is it honoring to God? So, if they want to do drugs,
Oh.
is that something that you would do? No, because it's not honoring to God. But if they want good food, oh yeah, absolutely. If they're vegan,
Ooh.
you wouldn't, and you invited them over, I wouldn't give them steak, right?
Yeah.
That's not really a good way to host.
Yeah.
And so you would honor them. And so that's when you would kind of put the focus outside of yourself to the other party and making sure that it's still under the umbrella of honoring God. And so that's what I would say, generally speaking. It's really hard to speak simply generally because when you do that, you lose a lot of the nuances that we
Right,
saw
right,
from Proverbs chapter 3, 1 through 8. And so you would kind of lose a lot of the nuances, which was why we had that longer teaching. But if you wanted to kind of concisely point out this is one of the main themes that you should look at, yeah, you should think about your guests when you're hosting. And if you're a guest, you should think about the host.
Right.
And so this is the kind of culture that you would want to adopt. So if there is a culture that is antithetical to what this is saying, then that culture is wrong. It needs to change. So not all cultures have supremacy over all the things that we do. Just because it's cultural doesn't mean we do it.
Yeah.
But culture can stem from something that is good, some all truth, when it comes to hosting or being a guest. So I would say, yeah, follow those things.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to ask this question because people may want to be better at hosting. People may want to be more hospitable. And I thought this might be an interesting question for people to think about. How can I host better? How can I be more hospitable to those who are around me? How can I serve people better in this way? So that's why I asked.
Yeah, so I mean, personally speaking, the things that I remember, and this is not necessarily great, evil, or good, even good or bad. This is what it is. When people ask me to come over, there are many different types of people, and I try to be a good guest. And so I go with perhaps what they expect. But every once in a while, you'll have a host that really cares about you, that really wants you to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciate people like that. They're like, oh, Piyush, thanks for coming. We thought you would like to eat this. And then when we sit down, it's not like, can you do this teaching for us? Or I have so many questions I've always wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
They're just like, what can we do? How can we pray for you? And is there something that you want to do now? For the most part, and this is talking about me personally, if you ask me what I want to do, I just want to relax because I'm always on the move. I'm always reading something, listening to something anyway. So if you ask me what I want to do in my downtime, I want to be down. I just want to relax. And so rarely do I have downtime. So even in my currently now, because my wife and kid is in Korea, I actually have less downtime than I had when they were here, because I think people are like, oh, because because your wife and kid aren't home, that you must have a lot of time. So actually my breakfast, I was telling Junsak the other day, for the past week, my breakfast, lunch, and dinner has been booked. So I'm just always out.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I'm totally fine with that. I'm too busy to, people go like, oh, do you miss your wife and kid? I was like, I'm actually too busy to miss them.
Yeah.
And so it's been kind of a trip. And so I find that part enjoyable in life too. There's no complaints from me. But in the midst of all these things, I kind of see where people are at. And I have to say, I am thankful for those people that do invite me or who invite whomever. And what they would do is they would be like, I think Sam would enjoy this. And then when you come, it's like you think, I think Sam would want to talk about this. What's really relaxing for him? What would encourage him? What would stir him up? What would he really be blessed by?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you focus on when you host, okay? Not necessarily like, I really want to show him this about me, but you really think about your guests. And when your guests come over, they will be like, oh, how can I honor the host? So it is kind of a double honoring in that way from each party to the other. And if we have that kind of culture in our church, it would be a fantastic culture to have.
Yeah.
And that's what I was hoping that people would get. That's the general overview of the first part of Proverbs 23. Again, the nuances there are not to be missed. That's why Proverbs, you wait and you sit on these things. And so I would recommend that. Just don't take the general application and just run with it.
Yeah.
Look at all the nuances. And that's why, coming out to WOW would, we would handle that.
Right. Yeah, I think it's WOW has been really helpful, and it's been encouraging going through Proverbs together. And so we meet every Wednesday once again at 7:30 for a heavy dinner. It's not even light dinner anymore. It's pretty heavy.
We had chicken nuggets.
And fries.
Yeah, I still couldn't do more than 26.
I don't think you should do more than that. I don't think you should have.
I talked to some people after because I said in my talk how it is a little depressing that I can't eat as much as I used to, that I wanted to. And they were saying, maybe it's your body just rejecting all the oils and chemicals because maybe chicken nuggets aren't the healthiest thing you can eat. But I was thinking about that for anything. I remember eating sushi and I couldn't eat as much sushi as I used to.
Isn't that like a good thing? Isn't that a good thing though? Like, that's a good thing.
That's what people also said, which I don't necessarily agree with. You are as strong as you can eat.
I don't know.
If you could consume 10,000 calories, you can output that 10,000 calories.
I mean, it's true. Yeah.
If you can only consume 2,000, you can output 2,000. You cannot output 10,000 calories worth of energy.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. So if you can consume that many calories, you can output that much. And I'm not saying that I wanted to, consume 10,000 calories just so that it gets stored in fat. I'm saying if I can consume 10, I know that I can output 10. But if you can't consume 10, you cannot output 10. That's the point.
I feel like 26 chicken nuggets though is a lot though, no? Like calorie wise. Is it not?
What Brian wants to say something.
So there is a conspiracy theory going around, and I'm the leading conspiracist in this. Chunsuk barely eats, but he outputs a lot of power, and so there's something missing, and I've been trying to figure out what it is. So I'm not really his friend. I'm actually researching him. That's why I spend so much time with him, because he's a specimen, and I don't know what's going on.
He is a physical specimen.
Yeah, I don't understand it. He got into a car accident, walked out,
and then the cop was like,
"Well, he thought I got hit because I was shaking." And I was like, "It's that guy actually. It's not me." So he kicked his door out and he walked out like he was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and then there was like oil dripping everywhere. I thought it was gonna like catch on fire. I was like, "You got to get out!" He like burst out of this car. He benches like 370 something, but he eats like a sandwich a day and calls it a day. So it's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are gifted, but I don't think he's that guy. So it's weird.
No, it's just basic math. So I don't believe in that conspiracy.
You think he eats at home?
I think he eats what he outputs. Yes.
But what he outputs is a ridiculous amount of watts.
He eats what he outputs. That's all. You cannot output. Who do you think he is? Is he like an angel or demon?
No, he's definitely not an angel.
Physical realm. Yeah, he outputs what he inputs. So if he's outputting 10,000 calories worth of energy, that means he input it somewhere. Now, is it healthy? I don't know. Like what he inputs? I don't know. I don't know
but
what
he
eats
eat more than him though. But I can't output. No, but you output more than me.
So this is one comedian that said, no, I'm not talking about Chunsook. This is
Yeah.
one comedian that said, I was always confused at these heavyset people that don't need anything. And then when I slept over a friend's house who was heavyset, obviously he didn't use the word heavyset. He would hear rustling at midnight, and he knew where those calories came in from, because that's when they would eat. And he's like, all these people, they're like, oh, I only eat a little, but it's my genetics. They're all liars. That was his point. So all these people that are saying, oh, it's just genetics, I just retain weight and things like that, all complete lies. And he was saying they eat. You just don't see it in the daytime. They're like, they're night crawlers. No, he didn't say that, but the point is you cannot output what you don't input. So yeah, I'm sure there's like conditions where you retain water or you retain fat more readily.
Yeah.
But you cannot retain what you don't input. So if you don't input anything, there is no retention. Does that make sense? You don't get fat by breathing air. There's no such thing. It means you input something, okay? And if you're inputting something, you can output that. So let's say, you eat 10,000 calories worth of food and you output 2. That means that 8,000 calories is going to be stored somewhere. It's just basic nutritional science. This is not, it's not, this is not even contested. This is just basic stuff. I guess TikTok people will contest it, but yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so Chunsook inputs what he can output.
Okay, so I would agree.
I output about 1,100 calories a day, according to my watch.
So he said he outputs
What are you talking about?
That's what it says.
1,000 calories a day, according to his Apple Watch.
When you lift?
Yeah. Well, I don't lift anymore.
He just runs.
Wait a minute. So your Apple Watch tells you burn 1,200?
No, just like throughout the day.
Yeah, throughout the day?
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not considering his basal metabolic
Right,
rate.
that's what I'm
It's
asking.
not- And then when you also consume food, you also use some
Right.
energy to consume,
to digest. Yeah.
So there's all these things that you have to do. I think the biggest factor on someone who gains weight or not is the BMR. I think that's the biggest one. It's what your basal metabolic rate is.
Yeah.
And the gym and stuff, it's very minuscule, maybe 5%
No, that's true.
of what you input.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And so if you think the gym is going to make you lose weight, no, the gym is the place where you get muscle, so your BMR goes up. But once your your muscle proportion to your body mass is very low, then you know that that's not necessarily a good thing. You need to get that muscle up there. This is just basic stuff. Even my dad would say, like he would read articles, which is true. The people who have the longest, healthiest lives retain muscle in their body.
Yeah, yeah.
So once you lose that muscle, you just die quicker. You need muscle because that's where your BMR is. That's where your energy output comes from. No energy output, no input, all that stuff is just a more, decrepit kind of life that you will live. You walk around like Mr. Burns.
Yeah, I think that's why
Yeah.
when men retire, their health just goes down the drain immediately. And they don't work.
Yeah, because
in
they're
any
not
way.
working. They're
Right.
They're more sedentary.
Right.
They
yeah.
lose muscle. So it's absolutely important that you continue to exercise and work out, not so that you burn calories. It's so that you create muscle so that your body will burn those calories.
So I really wanted to do like a working out episode, but no one will listen to it. But I really wanted to talk about it. But no one will listen to it.
Someone wanted us to do an episode on immigration.
Yeah.
See, you wouldn't be interested.
No, I immigrated here. So I'm interested.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah, that was a cool little segment. I don't know what that was about. Current events. So this current event is really interesting because I think we did talk about this before, but I wanted to ask it again. With the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, a lot of things have come out, right? A lot of conspiracy theories have come out, like why wasn't the counter snipers why weren't they doing their job? Why wasn't the security doing their job? All this other stuff. Like, who was the shooter? But what I found to be interesting was there was a picture that was circulating and a video that was circulating where one of, or actually more than one, of Donald Trump's security detail were females, were women. And, I think some people were mocking, but others were genuinely concerned. This woman didn't know how to holster her weapon. She looked frazzled. She looked dazed. She looked like she didn't know what to do. And that could have just been her, right? And we're not talking about women in general, but it could have just been her. But the question comes to mind. Here's a woman that is smaller, not as strong as Donald Trump, and yet here she is physically protecting Donald Trump. And it brings to question, should women be in security and the armed forces? Do Christians support this, knowing that genetically women are weaker physically? Why would we allow a weaker person to protect a stronger person? The stronger person should be protecting the weaker person. So, but I mean, obviously this was this woman's job, being Trump's security. And so how do we think through this where women are protecting men?
This is just a whole big mess, everything that went down. It's such a mess that there are so many different, when sin complicates things, it just becomes a mess everywhere. So this is one of those things where you're like, something definitely went on and there's something definitely wrong and everything just went wrong that day. In fact, now there are whistleblower allegations, and I'm sure you may have heard something to this, but Senator Josh Hawley, he actually provided a letter asking the Secretary of Homeland Security to come, Alejandro Mayorkas, I think is his name.
Yep.
And he CC'd the Director of Secret Services, which her name is Kimberly Cheadle. I think that's her name. Kimberly Cheadle.
Yep.
And so one of the things that he wrote in this letter was there are whistleblower allegations from the Secret Service that the agents that day weren't drawn from the Secret Service, but they were actually drawn from Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, instead of the SS. And so those are things that are coming up. But I think your question is more general, meaning should women just do it? But I'm just trying to get at why there may have been women that were smaller than the one they were trying to protect.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense, but maybe it was just a whole debacle where everything was just so messed up that they didn't have even Secret Service agents there, but there are agents from Homeland Security Investigations, completely unqualified then to be Secret Service agents. And it just so happens that's the day where Trump, almost got assassinated. And if you watch the RNC, the Secret Service agents protecting him at the RNC were huge. They were like 6'6" minimum. Yeah. Because Trump is like 6'4". Mm. But you're right. I mean, there's some basic things that we should get through. This doesn't even take like a lot of wisdom. It's just so much common sense. Yeah. If someone's protecting me, they need to be stronger than me. Otherwise, why are they protecting me? They can't protect Jack, right? Right. And so if someone's going to cover my body from, let's say, oncoming bullets, which is a very, very crazy job to sign up for, you need to be just as big or bigger than me, yes? Yeah. Who are you going to shield with your body if you're smaller than me?
Just even physically speaking.
Yeah. So I don't want someone that's 5'3" or 5'4" shielding my body. Yeah. That's half my size. So what are they going to shield? Nothing, right?
Chinchunzo can't shield you.
I mean, wide? Width he can. Yeah. It could be that someone shorter could be, but not someone half your size, not someone who's like 5'8". and half your size. So if you're like 240, I don't want somebody that's 140 pounds guarding me. That's insane.
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense. So if I do get injured, someone has to be able to carry me out of harm's way if I have Secret Service protection.
Right.
Can they carry somebody? This is why people are coming out and saying, this is why, forget about you even using the term DEI. This is why women don't pass these like really rigorous testing to go into the elite parts of military, like the U.S. Navy SEALs or something.
Yeah.
You have to be able to carry somebody your weight and size for a couple of miles. Can you do that if you're half that person's weight and size? So if, let's say 240 is the standard or 200 pounds is the standard, can you put 200 pounds on your back and then go? You know how difficult and I would say impossible it is if you're 120 pounds? That's why CrossFitters have different standards of even, the weights they use. So if you're a woman, it's like 95 pounds that you would use if it was a man's 135 because you just can't do it.
The RX is different.
It's just impossible is the point. And so should a woman do it? Well, first of all, let's get to the point where if you're smaller than the person that you're trying to protect, you can't do it.
No.
You can't do it. Even if it was a 5'4" man, they can't do it. But a 5'4" man that is, 180 pounds is vastly different with the amount of muscle that he can have is vastly different from a 5'4" woman. That's like 120 pounds.
Yeah.
There's just completely different makeup physiologically, and you just can't do it. Bone structure, density, all that stuff comes into play. But beyond that, and that's just a simple egalitarian argument, saying all things equal, you just wouldn't be able to do it. Beyond that, there's something beyond just the physiological, and that is creation. God did not create women so that they would be physical protectors of the man. It's the man who protects the woman. The man is the protector. That's what he created Adam to do, to be a protector, provider, and priest. And that's the man's job. If you're like, well, why can't a woman do it? Even if we look beyond creation, let's still go back. Let's go to nature. And this is an example that I used in the past, I think. I'm not sure if it's here, but I did use it. Let's say there are 10 people and you need to send nine of these people to war to protect one. Let's just say that. But two different scenarios. If, let's say, you can send 9 women to war and there's only one man left, would you do it? And if you could send 9 men to war and there's 1 woman left, which one would you rather have? If you need to, propagate human society afterwards, there is no scenario where a society can survive. Let's say a nation's left down to just 1 woman, that nation's dead.
Yeah.
The nation's dead. It doesn't matter if you have 50,000 men. If there's only 1 woman alive, that nation is dead. But if you have 50,000 women and 1 man, that nation can still technically survive.
Yeah.
This is why throughout history we protected women and children, because without women and children, that nation is dead. So who did God give the authority, the call, the designation to protect? It's the guy. Because it even makes sense naturally, but this is from creation. So men were there to protect women, because without women, there is no thriving, there is no promulgation, there is no succession in any kind of generational sense or nation sense.
Yeah.
You're just dead.
Yeah.
So what would you rather have? Would you rather have 9 women alive and 1 man, or 9 men alive and 1 woman? Because one of them, that nation's completely extinct. And another one, there is a chance. So this is why, even naturally speaking, you'd want to keep the women and children alive. So why are we sending women into harm's way? Because it's unnatural. Now, when we go into creation, God has set it up for a reason. There's a purpose for it. There's a reason why men are there to protect the women. He set it up in his infinite wisdom to show us that men are playing a role that Jesus is going to play. He's showing us that women are playing a role that the church is going to play, and that kind of thing. And so he's pointing to something even greater than the man and woman itself. So when you don't believe that, that's why people rage and they rail against creation order, because they don't like God. They don't want anything to do with God. So they hate God and they hate what his order is. But what they are really doing is they think if they get rid of God, they can just survive naturally. But even the natural order is now being threatened because we don't even have this kind of common sense. And so, again, if you wanted to put it naturally, it doesn't make sense. Creation order, obviously, this goes against creation order. Common sense-wise, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense that women are there to protect men. I get it. The egalitarians are saying just put the best people forward. I would say exactly. Even if we use that argument, you still wouldn't use women.
Right.
Period.
Right. Thank you for that. I just, I was curious as to your thoughts, because I know for complementarians, we talk about the family a lot and we talk about the church a lot, right? But we know, how do we feel about women in armed forces? And so I wanted to just kind of talk about that today.
Yeah, and Kimberly Cheadle was out there in a previous interview saying her like aim or goal was to have like 30% women in the Secret Service. It's like that has nothing to do with anything. The job of the Secret Service is to protect,
right.
The body. And if you cannot protect the body that you were sent there to protect, I don't care. What's women have to do with anything? But their idea and their worldview is women are just as good as men. They have the same function as men. They have the same role as a man, which is just, overtly false.
Yeah.
This is a kind of delusion that you're living in. So we have a deluded director running the Secret Service. And is it any surprise we have such a mess when it came to the assassination attempt of Trump?
So for our last portion, heresy or not, it's not a heresy. I'm going to go ahead and say that. These are two.
So why did we put it in there?
But it's more of like, which one's right? So neither of these men are heretics. Heretics. What? Heretics.
What's wrong with you people?
We're going to talk about Justin Peters and Al Mohler. Neither of these men are heretics. These are very great Christian men, faithful men. And I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this topic that they both talked about regarding the assassination attempt as well. And it's on the topic of how we view God's sovereignty in world events. People have been, even Donald Trump has been saying that it was God himself that saved him through this. But I want to talk about that, God's sovereignty, God sustaining, God intervening, and what that really means and what that really is. And so this is what Justin Peters says. He, quote, "So many are saying that God intervened and saved former President Trump's life. I get the sentiment, but I do not believe God intervened here or ever for that matter. Let me explain." And then he tweeted this, and he what he was saying was that saying that God intervened made it seem like God isn't really doing much up in heaven and then just kind of reaches down once in a while just to see if things are okay. And if things are out of bounds, boom, he intervenes. And that's what he's saying, that the term intervening, that's what it makes it seem like God is doing. But rather, he's explaining that God sustains. And this is what he says: "Every atom in the entire and incomprehensibly vast universe is being held in its proper place at this very moment by the constant exertion of God's power. There is never a time when God is not working. There's never a time when he's not sustaining. If God were to ever cease working, even for a single millisecond, the entire universe, right along with you and me, would experience instant decreation. Everything would cease to exist." Did God protect Trump's life yesterday? Yes, of course he did. Was that his intervention? To be theologically accurate, no. It was one fleeting moment and one tiny expression of his unceasing work, providential rule over an ongoing sustainment of his own creation. And so Justin Peters is talking about God's ever-constant sustaining of his creation and not God intervening in a sense. Because intervening made it seem like he kind of reached out through something that was unnatural to save him in that exact moment. But what Justin Peters is saying is, even that moment, there was nothing out of the ordinary in the program of God that he has already set. Everything was set and he's sustaining it constantly, and there's nothing new here. is kind of what he's saying. Al Mohler, this is what he says. The Christian faith underlies the two realities of divine sovereignty and human responsibility. Both are absolutely necessary to biblical Christianity, and both are absolutely necessary to the Christian worldview in every respect. But though both are necessary, they're not equal. Human responsibility is real, but it exists only within the transcendent reality of God and within the context of his unconditional providence. The reality of God's providence is something many Americans and no doubt many Christians think about with far too little seriousness. But I dare to ask, how do you look at yesterday's events in Butler, PA, and see it all merely as a lucky miss? If that's all there is to it, our luck will one day run out. Thank God that day was not yesterday. And so he brings in human responsibility into it as well. So the question is, how do we view this with God intervening, God being sovereign, God sustaining, and then human responsibility mixed in as well?
I think both pastors were able to take this moment as a teaching moment to show, some elements and some dimensions of the sovereignty of God, which is great. I think people should do that.
Yeah.
I think teachers should do that. And I'm glad they did. It makes us think, did God really move Trump's head or the bullet to save his life?
Right.
And so people are naturally going to think like things like this. I think it was Joy Behar on The View. Not that I watch it, but she said she went as far as to say that God saved Trump is a very unchristian thing to say, which I believe both of these pastors would disagree with. Because, are you saying that he saved Trump's life, but then had Corey Comparator killed?
Right.
And so that's a very unchristian thing to say. So obviously, I don't think she knows what she's talking about when it comes to theology, but it is something that people are now thinking about, which is great. So did God move Trump's head so that he could avoid the bullet? Did he sovereignly ordain before time all the things that would come to pass and make everything so perfect so that Trump's head would have moved in this exact moment so that the bullet would pass and just graze his ear? Did he do all of these things, or did he send an angel to intervene? Could be anything, honestly. Could be all of the above. What we know for a fact, though, is what we know for. So we always start with the things that we know for are sure. What is sure? What's sure is that the Lord is sovereign and he has everything under his control. The Lord is the one that sustains all things. And it's the Lord that actually dictates what he's going to do, when he's going to do it, how he's going to do it, right? And so even when him coming down to this earth was something that he had foreordained, but at the same time, something that he actually did. So he did intervene specifically by coming down to this earth in human form in Jesus Christ. So that's something that he actually did. So does he actually come down to this earth to intervene at times? Absolutely. Absolutely. He did. And he showed it to us in the Old Testament where the angels would come all the time, right? And so did he do that in the New Testament? Absolutely. The Holy Spirit would guide them. And then he would say the Holy Spirit would block them from going to, Paul, the Apostle Paul would say, he blocked them from going somewhere. So there is supernatural intervention here and there. Do I believe that God moved Trump's head like at that very moment? He just, brought his fingers down and twisted it? Look, I don't know. But what I do know is that when people see this and when people look at what happened, they can't help but to see God's hand involved.
Yeah.
They're like, this is impossible. The natural course of things would not allow for this to happen. And so I tend to agree with that. I think this gives glory to God. In fact, Trump came out on his RNC his nomination acceptance speech and said, it was only by the grace of the Almighty God that I'm here today.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely true. If it were not for the grace of God, he would not be here. And while Corey Comparator's life was taken away from, his family and from the world, we also know that every single day is numbered by God. It is the absolute sovereign and loving God who loves his children that numbers our days as well as numbers our hairs. So this is a very personal statement that Christ tells us about God, that he has the hairs on your head numbered. How much do you care for someone if you start to number the hairs on their head? That's the effect of God's love. So the days that are numbered by God is out of his love.
Right.
And so it wasn't Donald Trump's time to go, and God ordained that from before time. And so that's something that we can understand, and we could give glory to God. God has saved Trump? Absolutely. Is it by his grace? Absolutely. This is something that he had foreordained, and he could have, possessed all of his faculties and moved everything perfectly so that this came to pass? Absolutely. Could he have sent an angel to do it? Absolutely. He could have done any of these things.
Yeah.
Do we know for sure which one he did? No, but do we know that God is in control? The answer is yes. And so that's where I would probably stand. And the fact that people can't help but to see God specifically, his hand in all of this, I think brings God glory. And I think this is something that we should focus on. We should focus on that God really, by his grace, with the acknowledgement of Trump too, saved his life. And so because he has saved his life, I hope now that Trump will use the remainder of his days, or however long or short it is, in service to God. And that's what we would hope and pray for.
Thank you for that. I think that's a good reminder of God's sovereignty and sustaining as we wrap up this episode Monday morning. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we continue our series on Ecclesiastes 3, and talk about the different current events that are happening around our world. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.